It was a brisk spring morning in the quiet suburbs of Indianapolis, Indiana, the kind of morning where the air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass, and the trees along Maplewood Drive shook with the restlessness of the wind. The sun played peekaboo behind thick clouds, and the temperature hovered in that in-between zone, light jacket weather, though some kids still insisted on walking around in hoodies and sneakers without socks. On this street, tucked between two nearly identical ranch-style houses, lived a boy named Ethan Parker, a 17-year-old high school junior with a mop of messy dark blonde hair and a reputation for being, well, the kid who joked when he should have been serious. He wore his favorite faded Chicago Cubs hoodie, ripped jeans that his mom kept threatening to throw out, and a pair of red Converse sneakers scuffed from years of use. But this morning, there was no smirk on Ethan's face. His humor had deserted him like a bad friend who vanishes when you need them most. Today was exam day, the dreaded AP US history test, and the mere mention of the words exam paper sent a chill down his spine. The Parker household was buzzing, in its own disorganized way. The two-story colonial, painted a pale gray with white shutters, always carried a faint smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Ethan's dad, Mark Parker, a logistics manager at a trucking company, was already suited up in a crisp blue shirt and striped tie, sipping coffee from a mug that read "World's Okayest Dad." Ethan's mom, Linda, in yoga pants and a loose sweater, hustled around the kitchen tossing together peanut butter sandwiches for Ethan's little sister, Maddie, who was 8 and already an unstoppable chatterbox at the breakfast table. The scene was every bit as American as it gets. Fox 59 News murmured in the background, a golden retriever named Scout begged for scraps under the table, and the faint smell of bacon drifted through the air. But at the head of the table sat Ethan, staring blankly at his plate of scrambled eggs like it was the most terrifying essay prompt he had ever seen. His leg bounced restlessly under the table. His pencil, tucked behind his ear, tapped against his temple. Fear doesn't always arrive with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it creeps in with the morning sun, hidden in the quiet dread of an exam paper that waits for you at 8 a.m. in a silent classroom. For Ethan, this wasn't just a test on American history. It felt like a test of his own courage, whether he'd crumble under the weight of expectation or rise, shaky but determined, to meet it. "Eat your eggs, champ," Mark said with that casual dad tone meant to sound reassuring but somehow making everything worse. "Brain food. I'm not hungry," Ethan muttered. His stomach twisted into knots. Linda slid a travel mug of hot chocolate toward him. "You'll do fine, honey. Just remember, when in doubt, write neatly. Teachers love neat handwriting." Maddie, with peanut butter smeared across her cheek, leaned in with wide eyes. "If you fail, do they make you live in the school basement forever?" Ethan groaned, tossing her a crumpled napkin. Not funny, mad. But deep down, wasn't that how it felt? Like one exam could trap you forever. Like one mistake would lock the door on your future. That was the kind of pressure teens carried quietly behind their sarcasm and hoodies. The Parkers' neighborhood stretched like a postcard, maple trees lined the sidewalks, basketball hoops rose from driveways, and neighbors waved from behind mailboxes while jogging in neon running shoes. Ethan slung his backpack over one shoulder and began the slow march to school. His best friend, Jordan Mitchell, caught up with him halfway down the block. Jordan, tall and lanky with curly brown hair poking out from under a Pacers cap, was the kind of guy who laughed at his own jokes before anyone else did. His hoodie screamed, "Pizza is my spirit animal." "Man, you look like you're walking to your own funeral," Jordan said, nudging him with an elbow. "Feels like it," Ethan replied. "You didn't study?" "I tried," Ethan said. "I read like 3 chapters last night, but I swear the words just started looking like microwave instructions." Jordan laughed so hard he nearly tripped over a crack in the sidewalk. "History is basically microwave instructions, bro. Push button, something happens, repeat." Despite himself, Ethan cracked a small smile. That's the thing about fear, it hates humor. Fear thrives in silence, but when someone cracks a dumb joke, the weight lifts just a little. As they reached Jefferson High School, the red brick building loomed with its flag fluttering proudly out front. The parking lot was alive with the usual chaos. Teenagers tumbling out of beat-up Toyotas and shiny hand-me-down SUVs, clutching iced coffees, fiddling with earbuds, gossiping about anything but exams. Yet beneath the chatter, there was tension. Today, even the confident students looked uneasy. The school hallways buzzed with that strange mixture of bravado and fear, kids joking too loudly, others sitting cross-legged on the floor flipping through flashcards, some pacing like boxers before a fight. When Ethan entered room 214, the atmosphere hit him like a wall. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The desks were spaced out in unnaturally perfect rows, each with a sharpened number 2 pencil waiting, as if mocking the students. Posters of the Bill of Rights and Abraham Lincoln's face stared down from the walls like watchful judges. Mrs. Henderson, the history teacher, stood at the front in her classic American teacher uniform, cardigan, slacks, coffee mug in hand. Her expression was a blend of encouragement and merciless fairness, the kind that said, "I believe in you, but no shortcuts here." "Good morning, scholars," she announced with forced cheer. No one responded. The silence was so thick it might as well have been carved out of stone. Ethan slid into his seat. His palms were damp. His heart raced as Mrs. Henderson began passing out the exam papers, each one landing on the desk with a sound that felt louder than thunder. And then it happened. The fear every student knows. The moment the paper lands in front of you. Words blur. Questions look like riddles written in a language you don't speak. You hear the ticking clock louder than your own thoughts. Fear is no longer an idea, it's a living thing, pressing down on your chest. Ethan looked down at the first page. Question 1. Explain the causes and consequences of the War of 1812. His stomach dropped. He couldn't even remember what year that war started. His pencil hovered, trembling. From across the room, Jordan caught his eye and mouthed dramatically, "We're dead." Ethan stifled a laugh, half hysteria, half relief. But then reality sank back in. His future, his GPA, his parents' hopeful faces, all staring at him through this packet of questions. His hands shook. His brain screamed, "I can't do this." Minutes crawled by like hours. Students scribbled furiously, paper rustling like waves in the ocean. Ethan sat frozen, caught between shame and terror. Every tick of the clock was a reminder that time was running out. That's when he noticed something. His pencil tapping had created a faint rhythm on the desk, tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. Like a heartbeat, like a drumbeat, something steady in the chaos. And for some reason, that small rhythm made him breathe. Courage doesn't always arrive like a lightning strike. Sometimes it whispers, hidden in the smallest acts. The steady tap of a pencil, a joke between friends, a deep breath when fear says you can't. Ethan took a slow breath. He remembered Mrs. Henderson's words from months ago, words he hadn't cared about then. History isn't about memorizing dates. It's about stories, stories of people who were afraid but acted anyway. And suddenly, the War of 1812 wasn't just a question. It was a story. He imagined young soldiers terrified on the battlefield, families uncertain of their future, leaders debating courage against impossible odds. They weren't so different from him, facing something bigger than themselves. He began to write. The words weren't perfect. They weren't even fully accurate at first. But they flowed. He pushed fear aside, sentence by sentence. He started to remember more than he thought: trade disputes, the burning of Washington, Andrew Jackson at New Orleans. Each memory was like a brick building his confidence. And with each line, the exam paper became less of a monster and more of a challenge he could handle. By the halfway mark, Ethan's pencil moved quickly. His hoodie sleeves were rolled up, his hair messy from running a hand through it, but his eyes, those anxious eyes, were focused now. Determined. He looked around and saw his classmates in the same battle. Some sweating, some biting nails, others scribbling like their lives depended on it. Fear was everywhere in that room, but so was courage, quiet, stubborn courage in every student who dared to try. The storm inside Ethan began to settle. For the first time that day, he felt something stronger than fear: hope. Here's the secret no exam paper wants you to know: fear only wins if you let it silence you. Courage doesn't erase fear, it stands up beside it and says, "Not today." When the final bell rang and Mrs. Henderson collected the exams, Ethan felt drained but strangely proud. He hadn't written a masterpiece, but he hadn't given up. And that, more than anything, felt like victory. He exchanged a glance with Jordan, who grinned and whispered, "Well, at least we're not in the school basement." Ethan laughed. Really laughed this time. Because the scariest part was over, and he'd faced it. And so the storm passed. The exam paper that had loomed like a shadow turned out to be just that, a shadow. Ethan walked out into the spring air lighter, his fear behind him. But the journey wasn't over. Because courage, once awakened, doesn't stop at one battle. It prepares you for the next. And little did Ethan know, life had more tests waiting, far beyond the classroom. The final bell of Jefferson High rang out across the campus like a victory trumpet. Students spilled into the hallways, buzzing with nervous laughter and exaggerated stories about how terrible or surprisingly easy the exam had been. Backpacks swung over shoulders, sneakers squeaked against polished tile, lockers clanged shut in every direction. Outside, the sky had shifted from morning grey to a warm, golden afternoon. The wind that had felt so sharp earlier now carried the smell of blooming lilacs from the school garden. The air was soft, almost forgiving, as if the world itself understood the relief of surviving a battle. Ethan Parker stepped out of room 214 with his backpack hanging loose on one shoulder. His shoulders still carried tension, but his face was lighter, less haunted. For the first time all week, he wasn't thinking about history dates or practice essays. Instead, he felt something new, a quiet strength humming inside him. Beside him, Jordan leaned against the lockers, chewing gum like he'd just conquered Mount Everest. "Dude, I'm pretty sure I invented a whole new war in my essay," he said. "The War of 1812.5. Totally original." Ethan laughed so hard it echoed down the hallway. It wasn't just the joke, it was the freedom in it. A few hours earlier, the thought of laughing had seemed impossible. Now, he couldn't stop. The Parker family's minivan pulled up to the school's circular drive, the familiar grey Dodge Caravan with a dented bumper and a "Proud Jefferson High Parent" sticker peeling off the window. Linda waved from the driver's seat, sunglasses on, hair pulled back in a messy bun. Maddie was in the back seat, waving frantically as if Ethan had been gone for weeks, not hours. He climbed in, tossed his backpack to the floor, and sighed. "So," Linda asked as they merged into traffic. "How was it?" Ethan hesitated. Fear tried to whisper, "Don't admit it. You probably messed up." But courage pushed louder now. "It was tough," he said honestly. "Really tough. But I think I did okay. I didn't freeze." Linda reached over, squeezing his shoulder briefly before returning her hand to the wheel. "That's all that matters, Ethan. Doing your best." Maddie piped up from the back seat. "So you're not living in the basement forever?" He turned and gave her a mock glare. "Not this time." The car filled with laughter, rolling down the windows of fear and letting in the warm spring air. Dinner at the Parker household was as American as it comes, lasagna bubbling hot out of the oven, garlic bread stacked on a plate, a salad no one really touched, and cold cans of Sprite clinking on the table. The family gathered around the oak dining table, Scout the golden retriever curled hopefully at their feet. Mark leaned back in his chair, tie loosened, listening intently as Ethan recounted parts of his exam. "You know," Mark said thoughtfully, "I remember my college entrance exams. Scared me to death. I almost walked out of the room. But I stayed. And sometimes that's the hardest part, just staying." Ethan nodded, realizing his dad wasn't just talking about exams. He was talking about life. Staying through fear, showing up even when you want to run. After dinner, while Maddie worked on a Lego set and Linda folded laundry, Ethan found himself outside on the back porch. The neighborhood was glowing in the sunset, pink and orange streaks painted across the sky, porch lights flickering on one by one, distant laughter of kids playing basketball echoing down the street. He sat on the porch steps, hoodie zipped against the evening chill, and thought about the day. The exam paper had felt like a monster in the morning, but by the afternoon, it had shrunk into just paper. The fear was gone, or maybe not gone, but changed. Controlled. And that was when it hit him. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being scared and still moving forward. Fear is part of being human. But courage is the part that chooses action anyway. Courage is the heartbeat that keeps steady when your mind wants to panic. Courage is laughing with a friend in the middle of the storm. The following Friday night, Jefferson High buzzed with excitement again, but this time it wasn't exams. It was the varsity basketball game against their longtime rivals, Franklin High. The gym was packed with students in blue and gold jerseys, parents waving foam fingers, and the pep band blasting brass notes that rattled the bleachers. Ethan wasn't on the team, but he loved the atmosphere. He and Jordan squeezed into the crowded bleachers, surrounded by classmates who had survived the same exam week. The place smelled like popcorn, sweat, and that odd rubbery scent of gym floors. At halftime, Jordan nudged him. "You've been different this week, man." "Not in a bad way. Just steadier." Ethan shrugged, sipping his soda. "I don't know, I guess I just realized fear doesn't have to run everything. That exam felt like the scariest thing in the world, but it wasn't. And if I can survive that, maybe I can handle more than I thought." Jordan grinned. "Look at you, Mr. Inspirational Speech. Next thing you know you'll be writing Hallmark cards." But Ethan smiled because deep down, he meant it. He felt it, and as the cheerleaders chanted and the crowd roared, he realized courage wasn't just about one test. It was a skill, a muscle, something he could carry into every part of his life. Weeks later, when exam results came back, Ethan's grade wasn't perfect. But it was solid, a score that proved he had fought back fear and won. His parents beamed with pride, Maddie demanded celebratory ice cream, and even Scout got a special treat. But life had another test lined up. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan was biking down Maplewood Drive when he saw a younger neighbor, Benji, stuck at the top of a tall oak tree. The kid, maybe 10 years old, clung to a branch, eyes wide with panic, calling for help. A small crowd gathered on the sidewalk, parents shouting advice, kids pointing, everyone waiting for someone else to do something. Fear hit Ethan instantly. His legs froze at the sight. What if he tried to help and failed? What if he made things worse? But then he remembered that exam day. He remembered the moment the paper had landed in front of him, terrifying, and how courage had whispered through a pencil tap. This was no different. He set down his bike, pushed through the crowd, and called up to Benji. "Hey, you're okay, just breathe, I'm coming up." The bark scratched his hands as he climbed, but he focused on each movement, just like each sentence in that exam. Step by step, steady. And soon enough, he reached Benji. "It's scary, huh?" Ethan said softly, "but scary doesn't mean impossible. Let's get you down." Together, slowly, carefully, they climbed back down. When Benji's feet finally hit the ground, the crowd erupted in relieved applause. Benji's mom hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes. Ethan stood there, scratched and sweaty, but smiling. Fear had been there, sure, but courage had been louder. And that's the truth about courage. It starts small, facing an exam paper, answering one hard question. But it grows. It grows until one day you realize you're braver than you thought, capable of more than you imagined. And when the world hands you a bigger test, you're ready. As summer rolled in, Ethan carried that lesson with him. He filled out college applications with less doubt. He tried out for the school debate team, even though speaking in public had always terrified him. He even asked out a girl from his English class. His hands had shaken, but his voice had held steady. And every time fear showed up, he remembered that exam day. He remembered how a piece of paper that once felt like a monster turned out to be just paper. Life, he realized, was full of exam papers. Moments that look scarier than they are, challenges that test not just your knowledge but your courage. The exam paper had been scary. But Ethan's courage beat fear. And in that victory, he discovered something every person, young or old, eventually learns: fear never really goes away. But courage grows each time you choose it. And that's how a boy in a Cubs hoodie, in a small American town, learned one of the biggest lessons life has to offer, one that no exam can grade.
Like and subscribe if you want to be happy and motivate.